So there's 4 kinds of French people. There's baguette French, beaver French, banjo French, and coconut French.
Beaver French. What is beaver
That'd be Quebec.
French?
Beaver French or Quebec. If you meet somebody speaking French, you can ask them baguette French or beaver French. And if they say
beaver French is how I would describe We Magazine.
and if they're Louisiana, that's banjo French. Like our friend Brett, he's descended from banjo French.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if you're in French Polynesia, that'd be coconut. But I don't know as much about that.
I really hated the French Canadians growing up.
I came around on them. I hated them, but I came around on them.
Yeah, but you didn't grow up in South Florida where the worst of them descend every winter and just don't tip. And
that's why I fucking hated them.
And they'll cut you off in traffic. It's their vacation, so like they don't give a dick about anything.
So Jen, the most like I was about to say racist, but it was really more to do with nationality than ethnicity. Like the most bigoted I've ever been was when I was an international tour guide who was entirely paid on tips, because guess what? Tipping is not a universal practice.
Nope.
And who is surprisingly good, who was my bread and butter that kept me from starving to death, was basically older American couples and all Australians. Australians are cool as shit.
Yeah.
Like Australians, like who don't have tipping in their country, if you just explain it to them at the top of the thing where you go, hey, here's how this works. I don't have a full-time salary. I'm entirely paid on tips, so we're outsourcing my job to you. At the end of the tour, whatever you think it was worth, please pay me. They go, oh, got it. Great. Excellent. And they're like, they were great. The Australians were wonderful.
Australians are different when you're waiting tables, though. Because when you're waiting tables, you have to bend over completely backwards. And if you have a single other table to attend to, then they'll tip you like nothing. Because they really take the, to ensure prompt service thing seriously. So they're either the best tippers or they're leaving you a handful of pennies. Like they're very all over the place.
Well, the two groups, there were like a couple of countries that if a bunch of people showed up from there, it's like, I'm making no money today. I hated American college students. They were awful. American college students were the worst because they understand tipping and they're fucking rich because guess what? You're on a European trip. You're out of college and you're in Edinburgh. And they'd always come up afterwards and go, hey, man, great tour. Sorry, poor college student. And I'd be like, fuck you. You were here on your parents' money. You're going to go buy shoes.
Unless you're here to fuck me.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Fuck you. And then the French Canadians, the Quebecois, they would come on the tour and they would just stare at me dead-eyed when I told jokes. Like I could tell it was registering, but they wouldn't laugh at the jokes. And then they would not tip at all. And I despised them. And then during 2020, during the lockdown, my lockdown hobby was trying to watch a zombie film from every country that's ever made a zombie film. Mm-hmm. And I watched Revenu from Quebec and was like, God damn, this is a good zombie film. Completely flipped my position. Now I'm pro-Quebec. I think Quebec's awesome.
Based on the one zombie film.
It was a really good zombie film. Also, I think that the actual...
Politics is downstream of culture.
Actual federalism that Canada enjoys, which is more federalist and more localized than America, is pretty much because of Quebec. Because Quebec came into the Dominion kicking and screaming every step of the way, and whenever they wanted to do anything more centralized, Quebec would go, no, we want to have a French thing. And Canada would go, all right, we'll do it on the provincial level. So like Canada owes a big debt of gratitude to Quebec for being such a wonderful country. So I've come around on Quebec.
I found that all Canadians are shit tippers. They all tip 10% no matter what. I don't think it's a regional thing. They knew better, and they're still like, well, we tip 10%. It's like, well, then you're all dicks.
Yeah, well, I don't know where Ottawa summers or takes their snowbird leave, but it was definitely everybody from all the Quebecois came down with their barely existent Speedos, 500-pound dudes that looked like overcooked hot dogs in about 3 seconds.
The rest of them go to Hawaii. Like the number of times I heard, like, I'm from Saskatoon. Like, okay.
One of the best stand-up.
See, that's why the cheapskates they came down to Florida. It's a quicker flight.
One of the best stand-up retorts I ever did was I won't go into full stand-up mode, but like one of my jokes is I'm from Oklahoma, the Canada of Texas. And I did that in D.C. back in the day. And like usually people they don't like it in Oklahoma or Texas, by the way. They hate that joke. But everywhere else, people laugh at it. And this one time, this woman started booing, just boo, like really loud booing. And I was like, why are you booing my joke? Where are you from? And she goes, I am from Quebec. And I went, well, you're from the Arkansas of France. And the house went down. Fuck you.
Dude. Jen, where are you coming to us from?
I'm in Redondo Beach, California, where it is cloudy and very comfortable. And
I'll tell you what, it's been rainy here the last 2 days. This is playing out for my ideal summer. I don't expect it to be cold or temperate in any way. I just need 3 to 4 days a month where it rains.
Yeah.
If we can just get 3 to 4 days a month where it rains, and we can just break up the 100-degree days where it just comes down just a little bit, I'll be very happy. And so far, it's going well.
My niece is rooting for some thunderstorms when we get there next week, and it seems like there's a chance. So
yeah,
she got my storm.
Rained yesterday, rained again today.
Yeah, we had a crazy monsoon-style thunderstorm 2 days ago, where it was sunny out and everything, and then within 15 minutes, it went from sunny to batten down the hatches for about an hour. It was really weird.
Downright.
Yeah,
tropical.
it was like a tropical monsoon type thing.
I love that.
Jen, why are you in California again?
Oh my God, I'm so old, you guys. I went to my 20th college reunion. So I'm a
How was that?
total geezer. It was fun. I saw some people I haven't seen in a really long time. I think the prize for me is that 3 people that I studied abroad with in Germany, they came and found me right at the end of the reunion, and I haven't seen them, I don't think, since we got back from Germany. So it's been pretty much since the Iraq War started. That was the last time I saw them. So it was really cool catching up with them and seeing, how they're doing now, but also kind of comparing notes on what the last 20 years have been like, because they kind of had the same experience I did, just being like, yeah, we came back and it was very weird how just everything felt so different. So yeah, it was really, really cool to see them. And then I had a friend, we've been friends since high school, but he's been traveling all over the world, specifically to Russia. He was living in Russia for a long time, and when the war started, him and his wife had to leave. And so he was there, so I got to catch up with him too. And they are safely in Arizona, and her family's fine, but it was just cool to see these people.
Is the wife Russian?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's why he was out there. It wasn't just to enjoy the plentiful supermarkets that I keep seeing on these totally not sponsored by the state vlogs.
Well, no,
YouTube.
he was living there for years before he met her. He just ended up falling in love with a Russian.
He actually
loved
leaked
Russia.
a bunch of stuff from the
native.
State Department and had to flee to Hong Kong briefly and then set a political exile in Russia. Jen, what I like to do when I haven't seen anybody.
I would love to be friends with Edward Snowden.
How is Eddie? Yeah.
When I haven't seen anybody for 20 years, I think a funny joke is to burst out crying and then to say, I guess time comes for all of us. I think that's a really funny way to interact with people I haven't seen in a long time.
You know what was amazing is how many of us looked exactly the same. I was pretty impressed with our ability to not age much. There was a handful where you're like, ooh, time's been rough on you. But for the most part, everyone looked great.
I mean, if you compare how people looked at our age, like when we were young, we're elven now. Like we don't age comparatively.
Yeah, it's weird. Do you think it's like sunscreen use? Like I don't know what that is.
Wait, can I tell you my actual theory here, Jen? Both of you live in Texas, so back me up on this, or shoot it down. I think 9 out of 10 of my friends in Texas take Botox and lie about it. It's fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with Botox, mind you. But what I've noticed is all my fucking friends that don't have wrinkles, and you've got wonderful skin that I don't think you have to worry about this, Justin. But all my friends that are like Anglo-Caucasian that don't have wrinkles, I will like gaze at them and go, how are you not wrinkled? Like I'm your age and I look like I'm your uncle or something. And they'll get kind of bashful and go, well, I just drink a lot of water. And I'm like, bullshit. You're going to get Botox. It's fine. Just fucking admit it. Like
the only thing about Botox, though, is at a certain point you can't hide it anymore because you end up looking like Meg Ryan. So it's like it runs out on you. And so there's a few people that I know that they look like different people, and it's the Botox. I think that some people just really are lucky or have discovered retinol at a young age.
Also, I think, Heaton, you are selling yourself short because you've got one of the true gifts when it comes to male looks.
Yeah.
Which is that you look 40, but you're going to look 40 for 40 years.
That is my profound.
Like you are, like you
because
look
I've looked
40
this way since I was 18.
Exactly.
So I'm really hoping that I just make more and more sense for the next 20 years.
And now you've crossed the dividing line.
Yes.
And now you're going to look increasingly younger.
Nice.
Where you're going to be 50 and they're going to be like, damn, you look 40.
I hope to God that's the case, because it was like when I was in high school at one point, I went to a youth group event, and the priest was like, hey, Andrew, this is just for high school students. And I was like, yeah? And he's like, yeah, just people in high school. And I'm like, yep, praise Jesus. And he's like, yeah, you can't be here. And I was like, how old do you think I am? And he thought I was like 25 or something. I was like, no, I'm a little boy. I'm supposed to be here. I'm a junior in college.
Certainly not an undercover cop, if that's what you're wondering.
Hello, fellow young people.
From Austin, Texas.
I'm Andrew Heaton.
From Redondo Beach, California.
I'm Jen Briney.
And also from Austin, Texas, I'm Justin Robert Young. We're not wrong on this edition of the program. Is corporate media on life support? We talk about the Washington Post's possible financial death spiral. We will also discuss the House launching a task force into Project 2025. And if you are not a viewer of MSNBC, we'll explain what Project 2025 is as we lead into that and your emails. Heaton, you're finally back in town after a
sojourn.
Yeah, a real
good Quebec word there. Sojourn.
A really Oregon Trail-esque trip throughout the American Midwest. What wisdom do you bring us from the trail?
I really enjoy camping because I enjoy being out in nature, and it's like the extrovert craving part of my brain shuts off. Like my brain is like, you are one with the woods, and I just kind of hang out there for a while. So it was a really pleasant trip. It was really beautiful. Really nice, yeah. I don't need any ticks for a while though. I could take a break from ticks. That Mark Twain National Forest, that is 30% tick, 70% tree, 30% tick. I have Lyme disease. I have Lyme hepatitis. I have Lyme syphilis. I have every disease.
Isn't that one of those things where
scurvy,
like Lyme disease is there's these like illnesses, and now long COVID has, I think, kind of filled our generation's version of it, where it's poorly understood and yet sweared upon that it's the case. And like Lyme disease is something that has in a bygone era was looked at as like, okay, well, there's a certain thing that Lyme disease is, but then for some people there are these knock-on effects that go on years and years and years, and it is not as well understood. Does anybody else hear that?
I don't know shit about Lyme disease except for it comes from ticks.
It comes from ticks.
Yeah.
Yeah. The animated version or the Amazon reboot?
Fortunately, it's mostly Lone Star ticks where I was going, and I don't think they're carriers of Lyme. So I'm probably okay, but I should keep up.
Did you have to like dig them out of your skin though?
Yeah. But I use a buck knife because I'm a man.
You don't carry tweezers so you can grab them by their little legs?
Oh, you mean girl scissors? No, I use a buck knife.
You use a butter knife like a man, heat it up in the fire?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Washington Post, which is currently in free fall. An abrupt regime change and an unhappy staff are challenging attempts to reverse nothing short of a financial death spiral. The Post website had 101 million unique visitors per month in 2020. That has dropped to 50 million at the end of 2023. The Post lost a reported $77 million last year. Washington Post owner and Amazon founder Jeff Bezos appointed William Lewis as the new publisher and CEO to boost earnings. Lewis's abrupt reorganization, including replacing the executive editor and planning a new newsroom structure, has caused internal turmoil. Lewis's past controversial methods and attempts to influence coverage at his old media jobs in England as part of the Rupert Murdoch News Corp empire have raised concerns by Post staff about the values. Bezos' intense involvement in financial banking has supported the Post through significant changes, but its digital audience has sharply declined since 2020. Bezos and Lewis are focused on restoring profitability and maintaining the Post's journalistic integrity during this turbulent period. But how long will that last? Jen Briney, the person who uses the term corporate media more than anyone I know on earth, is this beast wounded, and is it indeed dying?
I mean, I don't know how many more times we have to do this topic, Justin, but I will say once again, yes. Yeah, we don't trust it the way that we used to, and I think for good reason. I mean, I know my trust started to diminish with the Washington Post when it got bought by Jeff Bezos, owner of Amazon, and even though there's reports that, you know, Jeff has said, report however you want, like say whatever you want about me, like it's still owned by this corporate behemoth. And I have found that the Washington Post and the New York Times, I look at them as basically the stenographers of the establishment. Like, they basically will be what I look to when I want to see what the line that we are being fed is. So, yeah, they have the best access to the people in Washington, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I trust what they say. When it comes to the Washington Post in particular, like, I looked at the digital subscriber numbers. In 2020, they had 3 million subscribers. Now they're down to 2.7 million, and it's not going back up. But I know that in my personal experience with the Washington Post, I have found their pricing to be very arbitrary and prone to being jacked up. So they'll give you I remember I had a special for years where it was like $4 a month, something like that, through Amazon. And then all of a sudden I was getting charged $20 a month for a paper that I wasn't really reading. And so I let my subscription lapse, and it was years before I found that I needed to actually read something from the Washington Post and had to pay for it. And they don't have a way to pay per article. So if you're someone who's not really reading the Washington Post very often, you're like, I really want to read this one thing. There's no way to like give them $1 and open it. So it's like, if you don't have the taste test, why do you expect that I'm going to pay you now $20 a month for this paper? And then they'll give you weird specials, but like, I cannot tell you what the price of the Washington Post is because it's constantly changing based on what you click on. Like, when I tried to cancel it last and they gave me a really good deal, and it's all really arbitrary and you can't figure it out. So I don't think the business model is good. I don't think their journalism is all that essential based on the fact that I, read about Congress for a living and have not found myself needing the Washington Post. And
which is odd that they don't have a market on Congress.
You would think they would, but I find that I can get what I need from Politico for free pretty easily. I can also get it just straight from Congress itself. I mean, that's kind of my thing, is I go straight to, if it's like a specific person I want to hear from, I'll go and they'll have a press release, or there's usually an interview with them that you can just find online. It's like a lot of the things that they would be covering in the past are things we can get ourselves. Like, in the past, you were reading the Washington Post because they did an interview and you needed that information, but now you can watch the actual interview. So I don't really need to be, told what was said by someone else. I don't need them as the middleman. So if they're not investing in depth kind of journalism that takes months that I can't do myself, I don't really know what I'm paying for. So when I look at like what I need in my job, I pay for Jamie Dupree. Like, that is an individual who sits in Congress every day and tells me every day what actually happened. Like, his work is something that I need. I feel like Seymour Hersh is someone that I pay for because he does in-depth journalism. It'll take him months, but when he does put something out, like the Nord Stream 2 pipeline expose, like, that is something I needed to read. And I can't remember of an example of something I needed to read in the Washington Post. And so if that's the case for me, I think the average American doesn't really need to have that publication. I think a lot of us are looking to the people we trust as opposed to the publication. And until they start hiring those people, I don't really need the Washington Post. And I don't think it's going to go good for them in the future if they are not hiring the most fearless journalists, which they're not.
You mentioned that they are stenographers to the establishment. When Donald Trump was the establishment, did you believe that they were stenographers for that White House?
So I don't think Donald Trump has ever been the establishment. That's kind of the whole thing. So like, he was.
Who is if we were to define the establishment, how are we defining the establishment?
I mean, the nickname everyone uses for them is like the blob, but I would say the people that have been in power for a long time, like the people that would hire the Victoria Nulands and the Robert Kagans and the Blinkens and the
deep state.
I don't know how to. No, I don't know what nickname to use for these people. It's kind of like porn, when you see it. But the people that have been in Washington for a very long time, the ones that are, pushing globalism, for lack of a better term.
The globalists.
Kind of, yeah. Like the neoliberals who are trying to make the EU a thing and make, I don't know. It's, it's Biden, it's Clinton, it's the Bushes, it's the Romneys. Like, it's these people, these Washington figures that have just been there for decades. And I don't think Trump fits into that mold, which is one of the reasons why I think you saw publications like the Washington Post freaking out the way they did, because he didn't fit into that category. It's one of the things people like about Trump, not me, but it's one of the things that people like about him is they feel like he's an outsider. And I think the
that
press
he is not a
such.
part of that. He is not a part of that, and so therefore he is attacked.
He's treated as a threat to that, and because
I think there's something to that. I think that there was a kind of Overton window of the establishment that Romney's on one end and Biden's on the other, and we're going to fight like cats and dogs to make sure that we get the White House, but not the end of the world if Romney gets it. And Trump, I think, was very much outside of that Overton window and does pose much more of a threat to the status quo. I think there's something to that.
Heaton, is corporate media dying?
Yeah.
And is the Post an example of it?
It is. It is dying. I'm going to focus less on the trust side of this and more on the economic side of this. I'll note my trust has gone down in establishment media the last few years. I've lost, frankly, a lot of respect for the New York Times that 10 years ago I just would have said it's a good publication and it happens to kind of lean left, but that's immaterial. And now I am much more incredulous when I look at it. So my trust has declined in a lot of these institutions. But for me, this is all a story of economic structures and changing markets. And it's a worrisome one to me as well. So the big thing that happened with the Washington Post, that happened with all publications across the country, is that their business model for a very long time had been classifieds. They weren't making money off of the subscription model that they're now barely doing. They were making money selling classifieds to people. When the internet came around and when Craigslist came around and Facebook Marketplace came around, that quit being a thing people used. And all of a sudden, 80% or so of the revenue stream that these behemoth newspapers were using just disappeared. And they've been scrambling ever since then, trying to figure out how to make the difference. Part of it is what we do, where we are independent journalists or independent analysts, and we have people pay us subscription models. That one works well for individuals. But for institutions, there really hasn't been a replacement strategy for that old model, and everybody's been limping. One model would be just one patron, that Jeff Bezos just goes, this is going to be a money-losing operation, but I feel strongly either about influencing opinions in the way I want, or alternately, I just feel very strongly about journalism, so I'm willing to take the hit. That's one model. It might be where we're going. The
strong tradition in journalism for that.
Yeah, but there too, it used to be that you had a bunch of plutocrats that owned newspapers that were all pushing their opinion, and they were making money on it. But you'd have like 5 or 6 in a city. Like it's kind of like in New York, you've got the New York Post and the New York Times. Like that times 5, where you had more voices available to people. The bit that actually worries me more is not the fall of the Washington Post. I'm not. I think I subscribe to the Washington Post largely because I like George Will, and I bounce back and forth between them and the New York Times if I want national reporting from an establishment outlet. But I'm not gonna cry if the Washington Post folds up or anything like that. The thing that actually disturbs me more, and I don't have a good solution for, is the decline of local journalism, which I think is actually much more of an issue. I think national journalism can absolutely be handled by what we're doing right now and what other people like us are doing. There need to be full-time journalists that are doing it, like the fellow that Jen mentioned who's going into Congress and is doing
Jamie
reporting.
Dupree.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm an analyst. I'm very rarely reporting. There need to be on-the-ground journalists doing things, but I think that they can be supported through Patreon, through Substack, through things like that. The bit that worries me more is the decline of local journalism. I think that local journalism is by nature less likely to be partisan and less likely to be national wedge issue, where you read your local newspaper like the Daily Oklahoman or something. It has they've clearly got their own political bent, but a lot of the reporting is on fairly quotidian stuff that affects your community. Of we've had lots of flooding issues and we need to talk about how we're going to deal with the flooding, and it might end up partisan. It's not really partisan, and it's local stuff. I think that local journalism is a good way of kind of drawing people out of national wedge issues that inevitably turn into this red team versus blue team grudge match and grounds them in reality. The decline of local journalism worries me much more. And the other part of this that I'm bothered by is I don't know what a good model is. One suggestion that I hear from people is, well, this is such a pivotal element to the democratic process that we just need the government to subsidize it. And I go, okay. If that happens, I can tell you right now what's going to occur is the Koch brothers, or insert your favorite billionaire boogeyman, are going to figure out how to get a program set up to gobble up that money across America. And you're going to end up subsidizing political opinions that just become grassroots. So I don't think that would be a very good model. Big data point contrary to it, I think the BBC is actually pretty good. So there have been instances of state-run media or state-sponsored media that work well, but they seem to be the exception to the rule. So that bothers me more than the Washington Post. But I do think that newspapers are in a very dangerous spot. Like, I think the New York Times, most of their money comes from advertising on billboards in Times Square. Like, that's where most of their revenue comes from, if I'm not mistaken. It's not actually from
they just own the
they
billboards.
Own the New York Times building. Like, that's like 80. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. There's a significant amount of their revenue is they rent
display
a billboard.
advertising.
And I think, like, when it comes to like cable television news, that it's gonna fall here pretty quick. I think that when you look at the graph of revenue in media, the highest grossing year for newspapers was the year before they fell off the table.
Yeah,
and I think that cable television
that tends to be the case.
Yeah, and I think cable television is getting really close to that. And I will have no tears lost when cable television implodes. I think that will make America smarter, if anything. But I think a lot of these old profit models aren't working. The only profit model that seems to be working is the individual creator model.
Low overhead, high membership.
Yep. Subscription models like Patreon and Substack seem to be the thing that's working right now. But for the institutions, I think they're in a bad spot.
I have a TV. You haven't seen my TV in my office, but I moved a TV in there that now I just have I have Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and the BBC just going in my office at all times.
Nice.
And I feel like Ozymandias. It's amazing. I can know when, like when they went full quad and it was all Hunter Biden guilty. I was so excited that I'm like, oh, this is the zeitgeist. I'm watching it come together, and I just stand with my hands on my hips like Peter Pan and watch the news flow. But yeah, they're all falling apart, and you are half right about the fall of newspapers. This is something that I have thought a lot about because I wanted it to be my profession. And let me say this. The brand of the Washington Post means something to me. I really believe that it and the New York Times. Journalists make fun of those two more than anybody else, long before it was cool to make fun of them. But it's only because they are the lead of the family in the way that your parents are, and you make fun of them. It has been really sad to see them fall apart, but it is because they were as arrogant as they were. The entire newspaper industry was among the most arrogant business-wise because they very blithely assumed two things. Number one, their business model would last forever, which was not only classifieds, but also auto circulars. That was the other thing that really, really made up the revenue balance, and that it was never going to go away. What you often hear from journalists who got into that profession because they weren't good at math, me included, is that what really should have happened is that newspapers should have instituted hard paywalls earlier. That would have been a very stupid decision unless you were going to simultaneously put a lot of money into financial transaction technology to make it easier and easier and easier. Nobody wanted to put their credit card into a website on the internet in 1999, which is when these things started to go tits up. What you should have done is invest in digital solutions to expand your offerings on classifieds. So you could have set up a market where, hey, Craigslist, sketchy. Sure, it's free. You can list it there. Sketchy. Not like us, vetted, attractive place where you can list not only online, but also in the paper. And that's your value proposition because you are a trusted entity. They let all that brand loyalty just fritter out the window as they said, no, the internet, it'll be gone. This is the same
outlet. This is back when Paul Krugman is saying that this is a transitive technology that's kind of a flash in the pan. Like the internet's going to be no more than an interesting novelty.
That's the thing. An L for which he should wear around his neck for the rest of his life. Paul Krugman, dipshit. The arrogance of that industry, and that's where he got it, because there were people inside newspapers that did believe that that this was just some fad. This is a bunch of computer nerds that were jerking off in their basement. Of course it wouldn't affect us. And also, if it does, boy, are we screwed, because we've invested tens of millions of dollars in these building-sized printing presses that we run these dead trees off and then throw them in your bushes every morning. That's our business model. But you were dead right. It was never about subscriptions. Subscriptions were a way that you could bind your readership together, and that you could subsidize the extraordinarily expensive printing process. But the reason why I never went into newspapers is because the people that I knew coming out of a very highly regarded paper at the Daily Orange is that they were all digital focused. All they wanted to do was make these institutions better, and they were going to the top names: the Post, Boston Globe, New York Times. All they were doing was running headlong into people that were saying, we can't do that online. It'll erode the incentive for people to buy subscriptions to the physical newspaper. And I was like, well, if the shit I want to do, I'm just going to get frustrated by, then I'll take some time screwing around before I do it. What they do now, I have no idea, but I'll tell you that I'll read the tea leaves. Right now, the Washington Post staff are very, very mad that they fired their executive editor and they're looking to redo it. There's elements of DEI involved because this guy is not only British, but also white and a man. And that is
the whitest of white men. British white man. He's whiter than Heaton. I'm like tan mayonnaise. That guy's like alabaster mayonnaise.
Bezos is going to sell. He's going to take this year. They're going to see what happens over the election. This is when the Washington Post should be at their high period in terms of membership. If 2016 is any indication, then they are going to hope that they get the same kind of spike if Trump wins. And if and when that doesn't happen, Amazon, the penny pinching empire, like they became rich. Jeff Bezos became rich selling a roll of toilet paper that cost him 14 cents for 15 cents. That's how actuarially disciplined that company is. They are really, really down to the finer penny. I cannot imagine that even if he wants to be the most popular guy in Washington, that he will continue to own that paper at 77 million. And I'll tell you what, if you don't like Jeff Bezos owning it, a guy who desperately wants to be liked in DC, wanted to buy the Washington football team, wanted to plug into this upper crust plutocracy, then you're sure as hell not going to like the vulture group of VCs that are going to come in and buy it next, because that's how we have seen all of this
Who will
go.
shake it up? I've recently had a conversation with somebody at Brookings. Her son works for a newspaper, and she was complaining about how the VCs had come in and cut the salaries to everybody at the newspaper. And I didn't want to fight with her, but I'm like, well, I'm fairly confident what happened was that newspaper bottomed out because of the subscription model. It was going to go bust, and a VC came in and bought it at a fire sale and is now propping it up. And so, like that, yes, that's the end point when there's no longer revenue coming in, is a VC group comes in and goes, we can make 1% profit off this if we fire half the staff.
If we fire everybody and then just make the Washington Post a tote bag company, then we can make decent money on tote bags.
Replace 30% of them with AI. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if that happens with some of these broad ones.
I think if you think there's like that Simpsons meme of Bart saying this is the worst day ever, or this is like today's the worst day, and then Homer saying the worst day so far. If you think that this is a bad time for the Post, it's a lot darker going forward. They are a horrendously mismanaged company. I think that, Jen, you are dead right. Their political coverage is abysmal. It is terrible.
See, I only go to the Washington Post to read the op-eds because, again, I love George Will, but also
and it's got a great history.
There are several really good opinion analysts there that I will check out regularly. But do you know who could bolt from there and just do a Substack? Every one of the opinion analysts that I read, every single one of them could tomorrow do it. Like, so yes, I don't tend to go there for the reporting.
Yeah, and I know people at the Post. I want the Post to be good. I believe that brand should mean something. I believe that it should be a beacon of good journalism. I don't think it's been that for a minute, and I don't think that there's anything to tell me that it's going to be that.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
Can I ask, this is another can of worms, but if you were going to try and save local journalism, do you guys have any silver bullet there that I could bring to the secret meeting of neoliberals or whatever that I'm invited to next?
So the biggest key is defining with any kind of news stuff is what do people want, what is nourishing, and how do you actually pay for it? Because again, nobody would say it is the idea of the reporter that I'm going to write the great article and I'm going to have somebody like me. When I was reading the Fort Lauderdale Sun-Sentinel, I read all these articles and I was like, oh man, this is great. But that's what journalists want to be. It's not normies. Normies scan the headlines, maybe read the sports page, and then do the crossword. And that's pretty much what the relationship with a newspaper was to most normal people. Now, when there was a thing that they really cared about, did it help that they had somebody covering it? Yes. But that wasn't the thing that they were doing. They weren't reading through all 5 articles on the local section every single day. Right now, I think that there's a tremendous opportunity to do local journalism in a very fact-based way, in a very straightforward way that dealt with city councils on an almost apolitical basis. But you can't fund it like that because everybody wants to know that information. Nobody wants to pay for that information. So you'd have to find another way to pay for it. I don't know
that newspapers are the way to go. Like I was listening to the radio, I don't know, a year ago, and somebody had come up with a series that was just like, I guess it's podcast, but basically this podcast network was going to do interesting stuff happening in your city. And I was like, oh, I would absolutely pay for a Austin-based interesting events podcast, 100%. So like I could see there being things where I kind of have my own personal radio station that I plug into that's telling me what's going on, like NPR or something at the local level, something like that. I'm more apt to do that when I'm driving than I am to sit down and read a local newspaper at this point.
Well, the same thing that's working for us, I think, could work on a local level. Like if I wanted to actually put roots down in Austin, which I don't, but if I wanted to do that, I could use the same model I'm using now and just become the person that you go to for Austin news. Like I could be the person who's telling you what the events are this weekend. Like there's a girl on TikTok that I follow just because every Friday she tells you 5 of the best things that are going on this weekend in Austin. So it's like I'll go to her TikTok if I'm in town and bored. If I want to know the weather, I go to Avery, I think it's Temesco is his last name, but he's my favorite weatherman. Like I go to individuals on a local level in the same way I do on a national level. So I think that someone who if there's a young journalist student listening to me right now, like if you love your hometown, you can become that person where it's like, oh, I heard that something happened. This person will know. And if you make sure that you're the reporter who's always the first on the scene and you are the person that everyone looks to, like you can make your own name in your local town in the same way you can in any other capacity.
I hope you're right. But I'd be worried about the size of the potential readership or audience there. So like functionally with my podcast, I am functionally, when you add up the numbers, a disc jockey in a mid-sized city from the 1990s. That's about where but my audience is scattered across America / the globe. Like it's not a huge audience. It's very geographically dispersed. If I were to try and convert my model where I'm going to do the same thing I'm doing, but I'm only going to do it in Austin, or I'm only going to do it, I would worry that I'd be able to get as many people. Like if I'm getting just a fraction of the population, but I'm magnifying that across a really large geographic landmass, I can make that work for me. I hope you're right, but I'd be very worried if I were switching that model to only doing local in my case.
Well, Jen, let me ask you this. So those people that do good work on TikTok, either meteorologically or in terms of social calendar, what would be a value proposition that would make you want to pay $10 a month for what they do? Like, what would they have to do? Would it have to be more content? Would it have to be better content? Would it have to be a diversity of issues? What?
They would have to be like my trusted source for all of it. Because right now I'm going to one weatherman and I'm going to one girl's TikTok, which I know it takes her, a couple minutes to do on a Friday. But if there was like one person that I know was going out to all of these different, like if there was someone that was going and sitting at the city council meeting and was going to tell me exactly what was going on in a way that I knew that they weren't, in the bag for any party, like if it was someone that I trusted, that I knew was doing this legwork and I was actually reading it, I would pay for that in the same way I think people pay for me. And I think that if you were to do it on a local level, like I think one of the things that's worked for me as someone who has done no marketing of my show whatsoever and has no intentions of doing any in the future, like the fact that I'm doing a national show and I can appeal to 300 million plus people, that's why having a couple thousand paid subscribers, like that's why that works for me. To do it on a more local level, I think you would have to be someone who's very well known, who's out there all the time, that people know your name, that you're at these meetings, that you're at the events, and like you might be, I don't know, sponsoring local things. Like I think marketing would definitely be more important, especially in the beginning, because you have a smaller audience to go to. But if there's someone in your town and everybody knows your name, if it's like a Cheers situation, I do think that I would pay for someone like that, knowing that having a trusted name in news in my local town would be valuable. But it would have to be a grab bag of topics. It couldn't just be one topic, I don't think.
I don't know at this point, because I don't pay a whole lot of attention to local news, although I should, based on everything I said earlier. I don't know that I would be inclined to pay somebody to be like my watchdog in Austin City Council. I would absolutely pay for a really good events newsletter. Like I tried a couple of years ago, I'd read something about how you can hire like a virtual assistant. You can go to, they've got them all over the world, and I tried to get them. Here's the 8 different websites I go to for events in Austin. I want you to go through and then put them all together and give bullet points. And it was going to cost me like $20 a week or something. And I was like, that's too much for a newsletter that I can do on my own. But if such a thing existed, where it's just, this is a compendium of all the stuff, it's very easy to digest. I'd be willing to pay for that.
But that does exist.
That's like textbook AI stuff. You can do that today.
But
Nice.
there is a free newspaper. Like if you walk up South Congress, there's a free newspaper.
That one actually is really good. I agree. It doesn't have everything, but it's really good. I agree. Alt
Weekly's a shockingly sturdy business model, because at the end of the day, head shops still need to advertise.
There's a lot of ads in those things.
That's been that. Yeah, no, they are essentially auto circulars with like one illustrated cover story that's like, fuck the man, am I right? And that's been the same business model since the 70s.
But somehow that paper is alive and kicking, and every time I go up South Congress, I pick up a copy. So
that's consolidated too, though. I mean, anything that requires printing is a problem. This was the business model that me and my buddies wanted to start out of college. We wanted to do a local news blog. People have been trying to make local journalism work forever. I mean, since we got out of school in 2005.
And sadly, it looks like people just don't care that much, which is a shame. But it seems to be the reality.
Here was the idea. You run a blog. Every day you have one top local story, and then you hire town criers in downtown that would say,
I love that.
That would say the story,
I love
the headline.
That's kind of like a more fun version of Time Out. Like his Time Out in New York and in parts of Britain was a fascinating idea, really good-hearted idea, I think. The idea behind Time Out was, we're going to create this newspaper, and we're explicitly hiring people that are homeless or otherwise, like, needing the money to be the newspaper salesman, and they'll walk around and stuff. But like turning it into a town crier, where you're like, hey, it's not just that we're going to hire some people, we're going to do some cosplay.
Just imagine a wild-eyed 21-year-old Justin Robert Young cornering you at a party in New York City, screaming that we're going to bring back the town crier.
Nice.
That was so annoying.
Oh yeah,
I dig it.
No.
If
there was a reason why I burnt out in that city.
If they had a bell and a tri-point hat, would totally be into it. The other thing I'll add is that there's also the prospect of what we could call like mirage local journalism. So like one of my friends, Jimmy Fallon, not Fallon, as he would say, it's like Fallon minus the healthcare. He's a comedian friend of mine from New York, but he has a very successful radio program that's a nationally syndicated radio program. And
he's on Fox News.
He's on Fox News.
I saw it on my new television.
No, Jimmy's a great guy, but I have nothing negative to say about Jimmy. Anybody who knows Jimmy Fallon, he's a stand-up dude. He's really fucking funny. But the way that radio station operates is, and I don't think he's even really thinking about it, they'll intersperse him into local stuff, so that like when he goes into stand-up, they all Like, he'll go to Vegas and do stand-up, and everybody, like, he'll get like 1,000 people that believe he's their local DJ. They don't know that he lives in New York, because the way it's formatted is he's like, hey, like, if you're going to be on the Strip next weekend, we're doing a bake-off on 3rd and Lindsay or whatever, because it's just like one of the ad copy he's doing. I'm getting too much in the weeds on Jimmy here. I know that there are other models that do this, where they have one person that's a syndicated personality, and they'll have them read local spots, and then they'll farm it out so that you have somebody that appears to be the local DJ, but in reality they live in Vancouver or something. And I think that can happen. Yeah,
that's what they used to do for professional wrestling.
Yeah.
Is like periodically you'll see stuff go viral of like Macho Man Randy Savage just acting like a total coked out lunatic. And it's usually from these like gigantic blocks where they would have to spend an hour doing all of their wrestling promos that would specifically mention the city they were going to. So when the thing was airing in your town, the first commercial would look like it was still the show, but it was Mean Gene Okerlund saying like, Macho Man Randy Savage, we're coming to Battle Creek, Michigan, and you're facing Hulk Hogan. What do you think? And then he would say, oh, Battle Creek. Like that would be, but that was its own thing. And it would create a personal touch. That's digitizable, but it shows you that media in general, organized media, is in decline. Yeah. Largely because the profit centers have eroded. And I don't know if they were doing the best work of their lives, of their institutional lives, whether or not things might be much different. It'd be curious if the Washington Post was right now looked at as something where, they get a bunch of awards and you're like, oh, those are great. Instead, the awards they get are for like, the Russia collusion reporting that like didn't exist and was essentially opposition research.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Give us money on Patreon, people, or the world will go to hell.
I know. Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it. I got him to talk about journalism.
Do you like
the
show? Do you like the show?
Minutes.
Give us money. Do it now. Do it.
It was either that or the Young Thug trial, the other obsession that I have. A lot of big news in the Young Thug trial.
Is that the one that involves RICO law? Because that could be an interesting...
by Fonnie Willis.
Yeah, okay.
And
you got Heaton interested in a Young Thug trial.
And what's it called? The judge had an ex parte meeting with the prosecution, a star witness, and the guy's lawyer, which the defense found out about, questioned the judge about, because that is highly improper, could be grounds for a mistrial. And the judge got so mad that the defense attorney wouldn't tell him how he found out about it, that he held him in contempt. He now has to spend the next 20 weekends in jail.
What?
Yeah, look it up.
That's so sketchy.
YSL Steel. Patreon.com/where-not-wrong is where you need to go to support this show. Low overhead, high membership. The future of journalism in your hands. Patreon.com/where-not-wrong. This week we'll be talking about 16 and 17-year-olds getting the vote in the EU. And what happened next is not what you'd think. Unless you think that they voted more right-wing. In that case, you'd be right. We discussed that and whether or not it will translate to the United States of America. Patreon.com/where-not-wrong. No apostrophe in where not wrong. House Democrats have formed a task force to counter Project 2025, a detailed policy plan from right-wing groups outlining a potential second Trump administration. The plan, published by the Heritage Foundation, includes significant overhauls or eliminations of federal agencies such as the Justice Department, Homeland Security, and the FBI, along with making it easier to fire civil servants. It also proposes a constitutional interpretation that expands presidential power for unilateral actions. The Trump campaign has said that only issues on their Agenda 47 website should be taken seriously as a roadmap for a second Trump administration, but that has not stopped Democrats and liberal groups from believing that Project 2025 is indeed the real roadmap. So much so that Representative Jared Huffman has announced a task force in Congress, emphasizing the need for a coordinated strategy to prevent the Project 2025 changes. Key members include Representative Ted Lieu, Jamie Raskin, and Pramila Jayapal. The task force will collaborate with liberal groups for research, organize briefings, and to coordinate messaging and legislative strategies. The initiative is part of the broader Democratic effort to spotlight these right-wing cultural proposals and brand the GOP accordingly. Heritage Foundation President Kevin Roberts has criticized the nascent task force, emphasizing their determination to advance Project 2025 without opposition. Mr. Andrew Heaton, how seriously do you take Project 2025?
So I think another way of describing all of this, I've not been following the MSNBC coverage, and I'm very curious as to how they've been doing it.
We've gotten a lot of emails about this.
Okay,
People
good.
want us to talk about it because they are either very worried about it or they want to know our opinion on
Great.
it.
Yeah,
So
and I've been asked about it like out in the wild. People are like, aren't you worried about 2025? And I'm like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
So,
People
I think,
are freaking out about it.
I think maybe I heard about this at some point in the past, but I hadn't thought about it till today. So let me give an alternate headline for everybody listening.
Okay.
Think tank has wet dream. Politician promises to do shit if elected. That's gang. That's what's happening. Like, like, I've a newsflash, everybody. Every fucking think tank.
This is what they do.
Has a policy agenda that they put out every fucking year. Cato, Niskanen, the Center for American Progress, name a think tank. They're gonna have
Left, right, and center.
Every one of them is gonna have.
This is what they do.
A policy handbook for legislators, and they're gonna have these poorly attended, sad lunches that they do on Capitol Hill where they try to get interns desperately to come out to talk to them about why point of sale should be at the place of purchase rather than... They all do this. There's nothing bizarre about having a guidebook. Now, you can freak out about the stuff in it if you'd like. It being heritage, me paying cursory attention to this, I'm probably going to agree with 20% to 25% of it. A quarter of it's going to be weird social conservative stuff that I fundamentally disagree with it. About a quarter of it's going to be outright hypocrisy where they're all in favor of states' rights until they get to like the Comstock Act and then they're like, then it's good if it's federal, like that kind of shit. So like sure, you could be afraid of the stuff in there, but again, I just want you to be very clear with this. Don't be a person that's afraid of a think tank. Do not go to sleep at night worried about a think tank. I know these people. I am not afraid of anyone at a think tank, and you should really look in the mirror if you're terrified of a think tank. The second side of this is, like, go to any politician's website that's running, and they're going to have a web page of broad aphorisms that don't really mean a lot, but hit all the tribal code words. Like, I went to Trump's website earlier, and it's like, what's Trump's economic plan? Bringing good jobs home and fighting the globalists. The fuck does that mean? Does that mean tariffs? I think that means tariffs. But and they all have that, right? And then they get into office and they do whatever the fuck they want. Like, you're lucky if they do 80% of what they said they would do. George W. Bush, he ran in one of the most boring elections in American history back in 2000 between Al Gore and George W. Bush, where the biggest source of contention was the lockbox, if anybody remembers that. And in the debates...
We'll put it in a lockbox.
You can watch this where George W. Bush on foreign policy, America shouldn't be a global policeman. America doesn't need to be a global policeman. We need to mind our business and be... Like, guess who went a 180 on that one? So, sure...
Or like a 9/11.
Yeah, stuff changes. Stuff changes all the time. Like, Woodrow Wilson ran on getting us not into World War I. Zelensky ran on the Minsk Accords. Zelensky ran on having peace with Russia and then an about face. It doesn't mean they're always going to do it, but I'm going to say you're pretty lucky if politicians stick to a quarter of what they said they were going to do. And in terms of what they accomplish, if they get 20% done of what they say they're going to do, that is an incredibly effective politician, because most of the time they're telling you this landscape that they're painting in the sky of what they would do if they were a god king, and their ability to actually get shit through Congress and through the executive branch is so limited that you're really just saying, I can maybe turn the galleon 1 degree towards the direction you want most of the time. So I'm not freaked out by that. I'm going to agree and mostly disagree with the shit Heritage puts out. I've never been a Heritage guy. Like, I'm sure there's some stuff I would agree with, but broadly speaking, I'm not a big Heritage fan. I'm sure that there's stuff I'd freak out about if it was actually on the books, but no, having a policy handbook for a politician running for office, this does not frighten me in the slightest.
Jen, can you set this jackbooted fascist straight?
So I'm going to take it slightly more seriously than Heaton, but only slightly. Because, like he said, this is a policy plan. This is a different name, but Heritage has been doing this since the Reagan administration.
Yeah.
The first time they did this was in 1980, and they called it the Mandate for Leadership. Okay. And they had one for Trump in his first term, too. The thing that makes me take this slightly more seriously is that Trump did take these policies, like the people that it wasn't Trump, because Trump's not a policy guy. Like Trump is Trump. We all know what Trump is.
You talking about old egghead Donnie? The guy that sits down with white papers from a variety of think tanks and
Make America wonk again.
And a calculator and really thinks about net benefits?
Yeah, that guy. He definitely has read all 800 pages of the
I don't think he's read 800 pages of anything in the last year.
Total.
Lifetime.
When people were saying his favorite book was Mein Kampf, I'm like, he's not a reader. No. And I tried reading that book. It's fucking terrible. There's no way he read Mein Kampf.
There's no way. But what I do think we need to kind of look at is the people that Trump would be empowering. So he's the top guy, but then he has to hire a lot of people. And the most intriguing part of the Project 2025 effort that I see is that they are vetting people to be put into government. So basically, Trump will get into office, he will pardon himself immediately, do whatever he wanted to do with it, executive orders, and then be like, oh shit, I forgot about the whole policy thing. And as they say, the ideas that get implemented are the ones that are laying around. And when it comes to Trump, I think the people that get hired are the people that are on the list that are handed to him. And so the fact that they are vetting people and they are creating a list to go into these executive agencies, and like, it's been a long time Republican platform to dismantle the government. And so they use different terms. They're saying they want to dismantle the administrative state.
I've never heard them say this before. You think that they're anti-government?
Yes.
Cat's out of the bag, fuckers. We figured out your plan.
Specifically, they want to dismantle the Department of Justice, which is like, I don't know, I kind of like the rule of law. I'd like to keep it, but they don't want to. And it's very easy to destroy. So the idea that they are vetting people who are going to have the mission to get into our government in order to destroy it from within, that is something I think we do have to take seriously. And so that is like the only place where I think it's just another reason to go, maybe voting for Donald Trump is not a good idea. Like, if you want to kind of get an idea of what he did in his first term, which is where he took the Mandate for Leadership from Heritage and implemented apparently over half of it, at least according to the Vox
according
podcast.
To the people at Heritage that are trying to get money from donors?
No, not Heritage. It was, I listened to a podcast on Vox, so like, judge that for however you will. But their analysis said that he implemented about half of their policies, or at least attempted to. And like, when I look at the 2016 Trump administration, this was an administration that got staffed with people that were not Trump people. Like, we had the ExxonMobil guy, Rex Tillerson, as the Secretary of State. We had Mattis, Department of Defense. Like, there were establishment people that got in because he wasn't really prepared. Trump 2024 will be more prepared, and I think this is kind of indicative of that. I think that's why people are so afraid of it, is that this would be a way for Trump to hit the ground running and actually be able to do Trumpy things for 4 years, as opposed to the last administration where he really didn't seem to understand how to work that position until the end of the administration. So I think giving him 4 more years, I think we can look at these policies and take them a bit more seriously because he has already done the job before. And I think he's definitely learned the lesson that he wants loyalists in his administration. So I think if we look at the staffing, we look at the policies, you can just kind of use this as this is what we could expect maybe from 2024, and just use it to decide whether or not you want to vote for the guy. But for like freaking out, like, is it the end of America? Like, I've heard some really crazy shit that this is the end of America, like the way it's being portrayed on TikTok. Like, it's really nuts. This is really just, what are the policies going to be? Like, look at it for that. And that's,
and I think you're right about staffing too, Jen. Like I don't think Trump had significant thoughts on judges going into the presidency, and he basically just went, Federalist Society, you guys have backed me. Let me know who you want. And like,
but that's been the standard. That's been the bog standard Republican position for.
Yeah, I mean, I was like, if you're a Republican and you care about the judiciary, you're probably going to pick all the people that the Federalist Society wants. And if you don't care, you just defer to the Federalist Society. So I think you're right, Jen, in terms of this, like, very likely staffing will come out of this. And I do think that this is probably going to be a North Star for people in Trump land in terms of their policy agenda, if you want to see granular what it is. So I think that that's all fairly accurate. I'm just not freaked out by it.
I don't think so. I think that, number one, I think Trump opponents are among the worst at coming up with theory of mind for Trump. I think that it is very often a cartoonish version of the thing that they would find the most evil is Trump. Now, that's not to say that Trump is coherent or he's not chaotic or you should vote for him. I would greatly suggest that you just listen to him. He's not shy about his point of views or his opinions. He's not shy about what he says he does or doesn't want to do. He actively rebels when people try to force things down his throat and say that he has to do X, Y, or Z. And then there's the reality of what he's going to be able to do, either through court challenges or anything else. The idea that that Project 2025 is the Death Star that it is portrayed to be benefits two people. Liberal media that is designed to keep people very, very scared because that is the point of their coverage. And the Heritage Foundation. Ironically, these are the only two people that are talking about this being
this would be
the
great
coming
for
wave.
Fundraising for Heritage can just
No, because that's
MSNBC headline after headline to its donors and go, look how
Exactly.
scared the people you hate are. Give us more money.
Because they're the only ones saying, yup, we're doing it.
Yep.
Lock, stock, and barrel. Every single punctuation mark in Project 2025 is gonna come true. It's them and the liberal echo chamber.
Well, and to back you up on that, when the Project 2025 people were speaking on behalf of the Trump campaign came out and very clearly said,
yes,
we appreciate, you guys supporting us, but you don't speak for us. If you want to know what we want to do, look at Agenda 47. So there's already a bit of Trump being like, wait, who the fuck do you think you are? And I think they do run the risk of overstepping. That said, though, I think that when you look at the policies that overlap, so let's take immigration, for instance, like they seem to be in lockstep on immigration, shut it down, deport people. What Project 2025 I think could do for the Trump campaign is like they're running on the idea. 2025 is looking at, okay, how could you do it? What executive orders could you issue? What laws could you exploit? What could you, like without using Congress, what could you do as president to make this happen? I think they're doing the wonky shit that the Trump campaign either isn't doing or isn't capable of doing. I mean,
it's not going to be a problem because Biden fixed the border.
Yes, of course. But that's why I think like, looking at this document, if you actually want, if you're especially someone in DC and you want to see like what exactly are they talking about doing, they've put it on paper for 800 pages looking at the loopholes. And so I think it could be instructive just to look at what exactly are they saying are the avenues to get this done. That's where it's useful.
I think on stuff like that, yes, where there's very clearly going to be a strategy because the border is, as it stands now, the number 2 issue. I think Harry Enton on CNN pointed out that in the 2020 election, it was the 18th most popular issue that people were going to vote on. Right now, it is 2. So obviously, that is something that whoever wins, it will be on some level because of either Biden's reputation on the border or Trump's ability to do something on it. That makes sense. What tends to be the hysterical perspective is firing of federal workers, reduction of the federal workforce, and reform of the DOJ. Like that's the thing that has when I wake up every morning and I watch what looks to be the most awkward conversation with your parents on MSNBC with Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski as they just sit in this weird closet in Palm Beach and pretend to be on the same set with everybody else in New York. The number one, it's either misinformation or Project 2025. The 3 days that I have come up and just randomly looked at their chyrons. Like that's what tends to make people think that there's an authoritative crackdown.
Only one
and also
third of those.
what was her Rachel Maddow saying that she's going to get put in a camp.
Did she really say that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one third of those give me pause. That is the DOJ thing. I'd want to know what they're looking to do, how they're going to do it. That is potentially something authoritarian and scary. I'll say, like, I'm at a point where I look at the FBI and go, well, it did some bad shit in the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, in the last 20 years, but they've without having any structural changes whatsoever or any law that changes the oversight from Congress or institutional nature of that particular agency, which has interfered in American politics multiple times. They now assure us that they now have good people running it, so don't worry about it. So like, I look at the, like, if he was like, maybe we need to like think about this like semi-rogue agency that has caused weird things going back to Hoover, that bit wouldn't scare me. Depending on what they're willing to do with the DOJ, if it is just indeed we want to hobble federal prosecutors that could somehow stop the president, checks and balances, so on and so forth, yeah, that would freak me out. In terms of the other stuff, though, of like making it easier to fire federal workers, like, yeah, like that's a like. I'm in agreement. I think there should be more of a circuit.
We can say that now that we're outside of D.C.
Yeah, there should be.
We were in a sweatbox with 82 almost assuredly federal workers. We had to be a little quieter.
Fair
on
amount
that.
of lobbyists in there. I could spot them. But like, like it's we could disagree on this. I'm more on the circuit breaker side, where I want to have a more responsive and dynamic government that can have staffing changes easier, right? I have a lot of friends that would disagree with me on that. They would say you need to have an insulated bureaucracy to protect it from the wiles of incoming politicians. I disagree with them, but these are within the normal scope of debate within policy wonkery going back quite some time. One of the things that Trump did early on that I liked was attempting to like do the heat and federal diaspora of like, let's start moving offices out of Washington, D.C. And part of that was shaking up that federal structure. And like that to me wasn't like blowing up the government from the inside. It was sort of reorganizing it and slimming it down.
Jen?
I think this conversation is veering now into policy, which is kind of the whole point, that this is a policy document. And so I do want to circle back because we've kind of not addressed the task force that's being put together in Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks,
no, the congressional task force.
Yeah, which as a Congress watcher really pisses me off because we now have people in Congress, Democrats, which are essentially going to be using our taxpayer resources, our investigative powers. Yeah, to like look into the policy of the other party, which...
I've been to so many sad think tank events. I can't take it seriously as a
You
threat.
can beat them up. I don't know what you look like.
I could fight them.
You can beat them up, all of them at once.
Yeah, but this sounds to me like the Democrats using our resources, our investigative resources, to campaign, because this isn't a real investigation, and it pisses me off.
Yeah,
it's an investigation into a piece of paper written by a think tank.
It's publicly available.
Is their point in life.
Yeah.
There's two things that a think tank does: bring in money and write pieces of paper. That's it. And then they go out and they raise money by saying, look at the paper we wrote and look how much attention it got. And look at what may or may not happen going forward. You really should pay us money so we can write another piece of paper.
Yeah, Jen, I'm glad you swung it back, and I'm glad you got me off of rabbit trail and policy stuff. I think you're right that the so-called task force on this is absurd, and it is taxpayer money being used for campaign purposes. It kind of reminds me of like when I was on the Hill. Occasionally, we'd get constituents that would call in angry because they'd get like constituent updates from our member of Congress, which always consisted of our member of Congress pointing at something as dudes in hard hats looked at him lovingly as if he was providing leadership. Like he was like, we should build the tower over there. And they'd go, yes, yes, yes. And that would be the cover of it. And it would be, Dan working for you and everything. Dan's, and be clear on this. This is not campaign literature. This is a member of Congress who is just updating his constituency on what he's been doing for them in Congress. Now, it looks exactly like campaign literature, and it's funded by taxpayers and also gives the incumbent a decisive edge over anybody that wants to challenge them. I think there's a lot of situations like this, and it strikes me as the same kind of thing. I'm glad you brought it up, Jen.
When we were in Congress on our little tour, we heard some great stories of the committee, that the bipartisan committee that is set up with equal numbers of Republicans and Democrats that has to enforce the line of what is and isn't, what crosses over the line. Hell.
Hey, you're getting too much
hell
graft.
On earth.
You're not getting. We only want 40% graft. We both agreed we were going to have 40% graft.
No, it was like
No, they're sending
you
mail.
have to. Yeah, you have to take a picture that wasn't in a campaign thing. And so they just go in the worst board game night ever and just look at pictures and say, nope, too much like a campaign thing because of X, Y, or Z. And they all pull out their rule book and determine what is what.
Because the point is to run a campaign using federal tax dollars. That is 99% of what's happening there. Like, whenever I get those phone calls, I was like, that's a pretty fucking good point, constituent. Okay, thank you. I'll let the congressman know. I can't comment on this because I am merely a servant of the district.
For whatever reason, I've gotten on some unhinged text message chains for fundraising. Like, they just all call me Patriot. It's all the right-wing ones. The right-wing ones are like, Patriot. He's going to jail, and he wants you to be the first person he calls. Click this link.
Hunter Biden's running for...
No, the Democratic ones are almost sadder. They are all blog headlines from like 2008, where it's like, Jimmy, which is the California Jimmy, not Fallon. Who's the one?
Jimmy Kimmel?
Jimmy Kimmel. It's like, Jimmy Kimmel slams Trump. Click here to watch.
The ones I bought one goddamn mug in 2010, and I think I got it for free if I gave him my email address, and it was like a fucking Greek myth where I took the pomegranate seeds and I'm dragged down to Hades every time there's a camp. I can't fucking get out of that world for that one Obama mug I wanted. So like I'll get like emails from President Biden, and it says my name 30 times. Andrew, it's so important that we have to do blah, 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 blah. You see Andrew, and it's like, God, like this is so over the top. I know. I figured out Joe Biden did not sit down and write me a personal email.
If you ever donate, just make your first name Fuckstick.
Yeah, do that.
Just over the rest of your life. Like, dear Fuckstick. It's over.
That's actually great, because then you could screenshot it and send it to the campaign and go, why did you send this to me? I'm sending this to all of the...
Remove number.
Remove me immediately. I don't know what you're up to.
Did anyone else catch the President O'Biden in there, which I think has a pretty nice ring to it?
That was a what's it called? That was a classic gaffe. I forget who said President O'Biden.
My great uncle Bill. I'm not great uncle Bill. When I would talk to him during the Obama administration, would go, well, President Obama, and like it was like not clear. Like I think Bill might have thought we had an Irishman in office.
Yeah.
That, like he hadn't watched the TV and was just reading, and he's like, God damn, an Irishman now? What next? Like would be really freaked out if he found out he was black.
There was like a classic announcer for college football forever, but he would always, I think Keith Jackson was his name, but he would always go like, Alabama taking the field now. Like, and so I always will think of like Barack Obama has now come into power. We're Not Wrong Pod at gmail.com. 34 counts of feedback. We're Not Wrong Pod at gmail.com is where you have to send your feedback for this very show. Bluegrass Camping writes, as a native of eastern Kentucky, my ears perked up at Andrew mentioning the Daniel Boone National Forest and his campsite. Did he stay near the Red River Gorge, perchance? If not, I'd recommend it next time, particularly around the Natural Bridge State Park.
Let me see if I can find where I camped at. I stayed at Little Lick Campground when I was in Daniel Boone National Forest. It was pretty good. My camping thing is I want to be... There's the heat and zone of camping is you're within naked distance and within screaming distance. And don't take that the wrong way. What I mean by that is you're far enough away from all other people. You can play music and maybe take your pants off and not think about it because it's very remote. But you're just close enough to other people that if you're attacked by a bear, they can hear you scream. That's where I want to be. So the campsite I went to was a little too much people. Like I couldn't take my pants off. But it was still a little bit less dense than a state park. Still, it was gorgeous. Kentucky was absolutely beautiful. I loved going through Appalachia. That is a gorgeous part of America.
I feel like there's so many jokes in there, and I just can't find them with the little lick and the naked and the pants off.
Yeah.
And it's like they're all floating around.
I'm teeing it up for you.
Weekend at Biden's writes, if it's true that Biden is doing his best Weekend at Bernie's impression, then who is running the show?
I feel like this is a Justin question.
Yeah.
My theory is if we are to believe the world where Joe Biden is essentially just an empty vessel. He is just a doddering old man that people around him tell is doing a great job, and that's pretty much that. Then my operating theory would be that it's essentially the cabinet, that every cabinet member has their own.
That's why none of them have been fired after massive fuck-ups.
Now, that would be the supporting evidence to say that that is true, is that none of them have the ability or the stroke to fire the other one. Because like Survivor, if there was a faction that built up, then others would go after them and try to pick them off. So they all just remain in their lanes doing... Take your pick of how you would describe how each of these departments are doing. I don't know which of them you would say is doing the best, but that is the reason why nobody has gotten fired. Even though normally there's usually some turnover. There's like, during the midterms or something.
Trump, it was like leaves. Every other week somebody was leaving.
Well, it's like, oh, I used to think that the worst way you could run a government is to have a bunch of incompetent amateurs just like, coming in and out and having them fired every 2 weeks. This version of permanent incompetence has made me really, I don't know, maybe I was too harsh. On Trump, Justin, I'm disappointed in you, writes. I didn't know that my inner monologue had a keyboard. For not pointing out that the most logical point of all of this, 34 convictions were 34 unforced own goals by the Trump 2016 campaign. Think about it. Back when Clinton was running for president, the accusations by Jennifer Flowers were in the news. That didn't stop him from getting elected. And in that case, Jennifer Flowers accused Clinton of unwanted harassment, if not outright rape. In the Stormy Daniels case, there was no accusation against Trump that he raped or forced the porn star to have sex with him. She either demanded hush money or he proactively offered hush money to try to keep the story from coming to light. What an apple dumpling gang kind of amateur move. Those who disliked Hillary Clinton already in 2016 wouldn't have changed their minds about Donald Trump because he had sex with a porn star. So even if this had come out during the campaign, it would have been a nothing burger.
I think you've convinced me, listener. I think that Trump, now that I think of it, Trump shouldn't have done anything, and that if it came up, just been like, you know what? She wasn't a good lay. You'd think she wasn't a good lay. Look at her now. Like, yeah, I think that actually would have been very Trumpy and probably would have been water off a duck's back.
I almost think like this is supporting evidence for the fact that he paid her off because he didn't want his wife to be humiliated yet again.
Yeah.
Because like that
you knew the electorate wouldn't give a shit, but he might have some trouble with Melania.
Well, because that, let's imagine that Trump and Melania have one of those like Don Draper relationships, which is do what you need to do. Don't let it show up in the neighborhood. Don't humiliate me. If you humiliate me, then we have a problem. Whatever you need to do whatever you need to do. What was happening during this, and part of the reason why I don't believe that if this had come out, it would have affected the election, is that we already had like a list of 30 women that said that he did X, Y, and Z. This was probably the nicest version of it. It didn't involve him groping or anything like that. This was just a consensual sexual activity that happened with somebody that a lot of other people had jerked off to at some point. So I don't know. Were they unforced errors? Yeah, I guess so. It wound up, it wound up being the basis for 34 felony convictions. I don't know if you would have thought that was possible at the time, but it certainly became possible. So, yeah, you are right to be disappointed in me. You should meet my ex-girlfriends. Heaton Hypocrisy writes, Heaton, I am consistent that courts should be implementing the law, not just be persecuting people we don't like. Also, Heaton, sure, this implementation of the law enacted by New York State, I think the law is weird, and despite the fact that I don't like Trump, the court should not have interpreted the enacted law as written, and Trump should not have been prosecuted. Answer for your crimes.
I was going to say something really mean and snarky, and then I thought about that on the drive over, and I went, I think the reason that I was so angered by this email was that, in fact, I am worried that it's correct. There's a part of me that goes, am I being hypocritical here? What I can tell listeners is, insofar as I can agonize over judicial decisions that I am in no way a part of other than commenting on them, I agonized over this one. And I can also tell you that with any of these decisions we talk about, whether it's Trump or anything constitutional, I really do try to independently arrive at a conclusion. I never know what my opinion's going to be before I go in. I think there's a lot of people in media who very much know what their opinion's going to be. I don't. In this case, I consumed a lot of media, and I interviewed a criminal attorney based in New York to form my opinion. And I might be wrong on it, but I did come by it honestly. The reason that I think that should not have brought to trial and be acquitted on top of that, the not brought to trial bit, again, like take it up with Merrick Garland because he didn't want to bring it to trial. The bit that freaks me out there is if he were being prosecuted for a straightforward misdemeanor of misfiling legal fees, I think he did break the law, but it's a misdemeanor. And what Alvin Bragg did was figure out a way to juice it on a technicality. That makes me uncomfortable because I think that is overstepping and using a technicality as leverage in order to get the law to be something that it wasn't designed to do. And insofar as the acquittal side goes, you could maybe convince me that Alvin Bragg did not rise to the threshold of evidentiary selective prosecution. I think that that's a reasonable position. You might be able to convince me on that. But in terms of just being able to disagree with a court case, all the time I disagree with court cases and think that they should be reversed by a higher court. And it's usually on constitutional grounds. Like I can think of cases where a district court will say X, and I will look at that and go, I think that they misinterpreted the application of the Constitution, and it ought to go to the Supreme Court and be reversed. This would be similar to that in terms of what I think the strongest provision is, which is I think the court case that was brought against Donald Trump is one that has some serious deficits in terms of Sixth Amendment due process of you're being accused of a crime covering up another crime that we don't have to specify. And I think that is, you can make a very good argument that a defendant should have the ability to have the underlying crime articulated so that they can defend themselves on it. And if you can't, then they've not been given due process. So that to me seems reasonable to acquit.
Especially if the underlying crime didn't exist, the case would not have been able to be brought.
Yes.
Because it was beyond the statute of limitations.
For everybody that thinks that this is a slam dunk or that Heaton's being hypocritical, I would just ask, like, does this not at all strike you as squirrely? Because I think that this is at least a little squirrely. Like, this to me has not been straightforward from the get-go. And, I'll keep doing my best, gang.
Smarten Up writes, no one knows DA's intent. No one knows Trump's intent. Stick to the facts to avoid torturous hyperbole. All DAs are elected. All prosecutions are selective. All DAs engage in charge stacking. Few defendants have vast resources to deploy.
Engaging in hyperbole is our entire career. So.
Enough said. In DA We Trust writes, we have to trust the prosecutors. It was quite the heel turn from Jen.
Yeah, it sure would be if that's what I said. But I said I trusted the jury, so there you go.
Unanimous writes, I was on a jury for a child abuse case, 7 counts. A woman ran a daycare out of her home. I would have voted not guilty because the prosecutors have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty. They just did a shit job of proving it. I was like, no, this doesn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that she did it. I ended up getting called off as an alternate juror at the end, so I wasn't able to vote. But the jury decided guilty on all 3 counts. Not guilty on 3 and hung on 1. The fact that the jury in Trump's trial said guilty on all counts by all jurors says something. All I'll say about, just to go back to the counts, there was never going to be a world where they convicted on 13 counts and didn't on 13
Yeah,
counts.
because literally the prosecutor just subdivided one crime into 34 units.
Yeah, so that was
if you agree
always
on
going
any
to be
of them,
that.
you agree on all of them.
But it's the unanimity of all of the jurors saying yes, I think is kind of the point here. And it's one of the things that I have found compelling.
There were a lot of very salient points I heard made by Dr. Phil in his interview with Donald Trump over the last 7 days. He was hopping mad about this.
Dr. Phil was?
Dr. Phil.
Oh.
Boy. What does Jen think about Tara Reid? Writes, for me, that was a turning point. Not that I necessarily believed or didn't believe in Reid, but it showed a double standard that would make it very hard to say Biden's character was any better or worse than Trump's. Trump's obviously terrible, but Biden is just as bad. It just isn't covered because he is politically useful for the Democrats. That was somehow a question. So, question mark?
So, I mean, I think the question is like, what do I think about the whole Tara Reid thing? And if people don't know, this isn't the actress from American Pie. This is someone that...
Oh, never mind. I'm out.
This is someone that accused President Biden of sexually harassing her when she was, I believe, a staffer in the 1990s for about a year.
In the Senate. And yeah, it was like on the groping level, not necessarily like words that were said.
Well, no, I think if I remember correctly, and like this is not something I follow closely, but if I remember correctly, she accused Biden of somehow forcing her to give him oral sex while she was a staffer.
I don't think it was that.
So. I think it was she was groped.
She was like pushed up against a wall. And
okay. Well, again, I said I don't remember the details.
Go ahead.
But I do remember something like that.
Go ahead.
But regardless of what the charges were, there were allegations, and I think one of the biggest shames of that entire ordeal is that she didn't get her day in court. And I don't know if that was because of statute of limitations. I don't know if that's because Biden was a very powerful senator. I don't know why she didn't get her day in court. But had there been a jury that got to hear all of the evidence and then make a ruling on that, I think it would be a lot easier for us to say whether or not it happened. I believe in our system of justice. I like having juries get evidence and then tell us whether or not something happened. Is it perfect? No, nothing can be, but it's as close as I think we're going to get. And Tara Reade never got her day in court. So, yeah, I think that's really unfortunate. When there's allegations like that, I think they should always be taken seriously and go through the judicial system, and that one didn't. And that's a real shame. Because we won't know
this is the allegation. In a March 25th, 2020 interview with Katie Halper, Reed alleged that Biden pushed her up against a wall, kissed her, and put her hand up her skirt, penetrating her with his fingers, and asked, "Do you want to go somewhere else?" That was the allegation.
Okay. So I stand corrected on the other part.
Which has not been appropriate in Congress since 1982. That was really over the line.
I mean, I don't want to make a guess as to what happened because we don't know. This is what we have the court system for.
What I'll say is that I think that became a hinge moment for American culture in that the Me Too movement coming out of it, you saw the phrase all the time, "believe all women." And when there was a prominent presidential campaign going on with the front runner that was accused of such a thing, for the right, the line transmogrified to take all women seriously. Which I agree. I think you should take all women seriously. I don't think you should automatically believe anybody.
Yeah.
But like that was the hinge moment where America went, oh, maybe we should have a little bit more.
And then further modified to take all women seriously, except for this commie lunatic who we're going to look up every weird thing she's ever said.
True.
Yeah. I mean, token women here, I don't believe all women. I know women who have lied. So I don't think that just believing is the way to go. But I do think having the court process have depositions at the very least, like if she, wanted to pursue this in a court of law, then she could give her side, he could give his. They call in, witnesses, they either settle or they have a trial. Like, this is why we have this process. So when it comes to women, like, I understand that there's reasons that people don't come forward, but I do think there is something to, if it happens, you need to come forward quickly because statute of limitations exists. And if you kind of wait on your justice, then sometimes justice isn't served. And this does seem to be the case with Tara Reade because I don't think, when did we even find out about her? I found out during the election.
March
of
2020 was where it resurfaced.
But did we know about this in the 90s? Like, did she try to go through the system and then never got that opportunity?
No, apparently, I mean, there's a lot. Look, there's probably a whole episode that we could do about Tara Reade based on things she said, ways that she's represented stuff in the past. There's been a lot of opposition research kind of dumped on top of her, including her love for Russia.
Yeah, they called her a Russian plant, which is another thing where it's like, oh, for Christ's sake, like the Russia
Although
line.
I think she might have actually moved to Russia.
She did, but like,
Yeah,
okay,
since-
if you're
since
getting
then, yeah.
harassed in the United States.
Yeah, you get a very friendly email in Cyrillic, and next thing you know, you're in Moscow, eating at the very plentiful supermarkets.
Yeah. So I don't think we'll ever know what the truth is.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that she made about as credible a case and had as much contemporaneous evidence. I'll put it this way. She had more contemporaneous evidence than Christine Blasey Ford had about Justice Kavanaugh during his confirmation, and she was taken very seriously.
Yeah.
She was taken deadly serious. She got a book deal out of it.
She was like an ESPN
got
headliner at one
testimony out of
point.
it.
Like there was a lot of
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
she testified to Congress. I did a whole episode about it.
And like that was a memory for which she could not find people to match exactly what her details were, and she couldn't remember the date on it. You know, Tara Reid had more. Does that mean that that's the bar, that it happened, that it's true? No, it doesn't. To be quite frank, one of the ugly things about situations like this, while we should take them more seriously, is that there does have to be some level of evidentiary proof if you're bringing forth a tremendous accusation, one of sexual assault or rape. Like, that's something that you do need an evidentiary bar for, even in the court of public opinion, you know, according to me, but I'm a man. Illusory Truth Effect writes, when looking into fact-checking sites, Bragg never campaigned on prosecuting Trump. He stated that he had experience litigating Trump, but never actually said what he was going to do if elected. Bragg said he would continue his predecessor's investigation and then go where the facts take him. I feel like this is an interesting case of the illusory truth effect, where somebody repeats a lie often enough and people start to believe it, sort of like Heaton getting laid in The Scamp.
I really like this letter. There's some funny stuff to this.
So I went and looked back what Bragg said during his campaign stump speech. And this is what he said. I have investigated Trump and his children and held them accountable for their misconduct with the Trump Foundation. I also sued the Trump administration more than 100 times for the travel ban, the separation of children and their families at the border. So I know that works. I know how to follow the facts and hold people in power accountable. He also said that he would continue with Vance's investigation and hold Trump accountable by following the facts where they go. So, in my mind, that falls under the campaign promise of, I have a proven track record of prosecuting Trump, and I am going to take this case that was declined to be followed by Cyrus Vance, his predecessor, and says he will now take a fresh look at it. That, to me, files, I read that as him campaigning on prosecuting Trump. But
it's implied. He didn't have to say, like, I'm going to go get him. Like, it's close enough.
Yeah.
Well, he's saying, I'm the best guy to do it.
Yeah.
He's giving his bona fides as to why he would do it, or why he's the best person to do it.
Yeah.
A Father's Day message writes, it's moments like these that I can truly be grateful that my dad is just a failed pot dealer sleeping on my couch. Legalization has destroyed my family, he writes, parenthetical, and not a real scumbag like the current or former president of the United States. We are all lucky to not be a Hunter or a Don Jr. or, Lord forbid, a Tiffany. Count your blessings, folks. There we go.
Yeah.
And finally, on the LP convention, we have a couple emails. More Parties writes, if we had a handful of parties, Jen, would you be more accepting of parties selecting their candidates at private events? It seems to me that if there were 8 or 9 parties, it would be almost impossible to hold national primaries.
No, I don't like parties. Like, the jobs that we are hiring for one position of president. We are hiring for 435 seats in the House, 100 seats in the Senate. We can do this by individual. We don't need to have these private clubs that are deciding who these people are going to be. Like, I see elections as job applications. Like, we are filling a position, and we don't look at it that way. We look at it as a, popularity contest, and we allow these private clubs to do the picking. Like, I don't think that we need parties at all. I think they do more damage than they do good.
And Am I Crazy brings us on home. If Trump wins the election with already slim margins, think back to the moment that somebody handed Michael Rechtenwald that gummy. That guy might have changed the course of American history.
That's right.
Can you bring forth your independent reporting?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was hanging out with an LP insider over the weekend, and he brought up. I think that this is. I don't think I'm revealing anything that is not wanted to be known, but
No, it's exclusive.
Huh?
Must credit where not wrong. Exclusive scoops.
Rechtenwald, the guy that we mentioned that got up on stage prior to Trump and had very weird dad believes he's a rock star energy, and like, kind of looked like if an alien read a Wikipedia article on giving a speech. Like, it was very strange. All of us commented on it. Apparently, somebody gave him a gummy, and he just sort of assumed it was 5 milligrams. But the word is that he was given a 100 milligram gummy. Now, I'm going to defer to my colleagues here that respond more positively to marijuana than I do. But 100 milligrams, if I accidentally ate a 100 milligram gummy, I would immediately try to throw it up. And if I couldn't, I would go to the hospital for fear I would have a heart attack. That is a quick. I actually now reverse my position, Rectenwald. I think he did a great job. If he was on 100 milligrams, that was an incredible speech. That would be like if I drank 3 bottles of vodka and then got up on stage 30 minutes later. Like, he did a great job under those circumstances.
Yeah, 100 milligrams, I'm pretty sure would put me to sleep.
Yeah.
But I did respond to you when you told me that I would die. I don't think I would actually die, but I certainly wouldn't give a speech. I would hide. So it's a lot.
100 milligrams is a lot. I think even people with a different constitution and a lot more meat on their bones would understand that 100's gonna get you. He did not seem like a seasoned edibles partaker in general. That being said, what a rookie at any convention. You don't take anything from anyone at a convention. That is an absolute rookie mistake.
I've been to one other Libertarian Party event ever. It was in California right when I moved out there, and they invited me out, and they wanted me to do stand-up, and I went, okay, I'll do stand-up. So I went and did stand-up. And one of the guys that was there, Larry Sharp, former gubernatorial candidate in New York, who I very much like, by the way. I'm friends with Larry Sharp. Larry came up and he's like, I don't remember how we got into this conversation, but he's like, we're doing like a fundraiser of like things people can bid on. And like somebody has mushrooms. Would you do like a mushroom trip with somebody here at the hotel if they win? And at first I was like, that could be fun. And then I was like, I changed my mind. Absolutely not. I don't want to do mushrooms with a stranger in a hotel where I don't know where the mushrooms came from. This seems like a horrible idea. Please take my name on it. No. But it nearly happened.
Yeah. When
Mushrooms for Freedom, they could have called it.
Back in the day when we would do Dragon Con every year, I learned very fast that a lot of people would come and bring their own home brews. And they would want to have you have a glass of their homebrewed beer. What you find out really fast, especially, this might have waned a little bit where every dude of a certain age with a beard wants to have a homebrew, but like it takes a while to get good at that.
Yeah.
And when you're not good at it, what you do is you wind up making your beer more alcoholic because you have to cover it with things that don't taste like ass. And so they all wind up making IPAs that are like 11%. And so if you are at a convention and you're just drinking as a matter of course because you're talking to everybody and it's a fun time, if you've got 2 of them, you might be fucked for the rest of the night because you just had that drink. I had to learn very quickly. Don't take any glass from anybody. Certainly don't take any edibles. Like, you don't know. The person who's handing out edibles, they might not even know.
I got a rookie story. I'm not going to mention this person by name, but I know he listens to the show and might know who I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. When I was in college and was new to the wonderful world of drinking that would so inform the next 20 years of my life, my buddy and I were about to go to a film at the university cinema. And again, we were brand new to drinking. We were like, we're adults. We should have some whiskey. And so we both did a shot of whiskey, walked 20 feet and went, I'm not feeling anything. Are you? And he went, no. Well, we should do more than, I guess. So we repeated this a couple of times, not knowing that whiskey takes more than instantaneous to kick in.
Yeah.
And went to then, as it turns out, quite drunk, go watch the film Hotel Rwanda at the, at the university. And my friend very innocently and guilelessly, without any malice, just leaned over to me and went, there are a lot of black people in this film. And I grabbed him and went, okay, we're going to go outside for a little bit. We don't need to be doing any running commentary on Hotel Rwanda while we're drunk.
Did you fall down?
I'm very good at appearing to be confident and coherent while drunk. So I did not fall down.
So you didn't cut down the tall trees?
No.
Hotel Rwanda joke.
I wouldn't know because I don't remember anything about the film. I was very drunk.
Nick Nolte screams the N-word a lot in one monologue.
Nick Nolte's in there?
Yeah, I believe he's one of the UN peacekeepers.
Okay.
I think it's Nolte. Anyway, We're Not Wrong is a production of Dog and Pony Show Audio. Our editor is Will Saddleberg. Great week of PX3 content for you. Not only do we have reaction to the Hunter Biden trial, specifically from the perspective of a Second Amendment writer talking about the gun charges that he was found guilty on, but also a 20-year security expert talks to us about keeping politicians from getting assassinated and why he believes that our current mixture of fame for people like AOC, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Ilhan Omar, who do not get the kind of security that they need compared to the passion that is generated from them, is a disaster waiting to happen. And then on Friday's edition, we have the great Edinger Mentum. If nobody reads his stuff on Substack, I would recommend it. He's a more progressive-leaning poll watcher, but he has been very unkind to Biden. He will be very unkind to Biden on this show, but he also reveals what he believes could be the pathway to a Democratic landslide. So if you believe that there's been too much optimism for Donald Trump, listen to Friday's episode of PX3.
These both sound amazing. I will tune in.
Jen Briney.
So Jen Briney is still working on her next episode. So the most recent one of Congressional Dish is the Transportation Safety Board stuff. So it's still a good episode. Go check it out. But I just want to put in a plug for my friend Brianna Joy Gray's Bad Faith podcast with my time, because she was just fired from the Hill, which I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not. And so, yeah, she's no longer going to be on Rising. And so she's back to being independent. And so if you guys want to hear from someone who is not completely pro-Israel, that's where Brown is.
She's not pro-Israel?
No.
Hadn't picked up on that.
No, her coverage was, sometimes it was a little much, I will say that. But at the same time, she, she was saying things that I just don't think are the standard line. I think there is a bias that she does not have. And so I think that her voice was needed. I found that her and Robbie were having good conversations, tough conversations, and I'm going to miss them a lot. Yeah. And I think her voice still deserves to be heard. And it's a shame that it won't be on Rising, but she's still out there. So I just want to let people to know that she still has her Bad Faith podcast. So go check it out.
Heaton.
I have become friends with Jonathan Rauch of Brookings over the last year, and he was in town for a speech, and we went out and had lunch, and he went, "How old are you?" And I went, 40, and he went, "Oh, you're about to get hit real hard by a midlife crisis, Heaton. You were a walking midlife crisis waiting to happen. Don't worry, I wrote a book. I'd like to come on your podcast and talk about it." And it's actually a really good chat. What Jonathan Rauch has done is gone through a ton of both social psychology and economics in terms of what a midlife crisis actually is. What are the actual nuts and bolts of that? Not the trope of the guy that gets a red convertible and runs off with his secretary. Not the tropes, but what's actually happening there based on data that we have. He brings in at one point, I thought this was fascinating. They've done studies on chimps, and it turns out that chimps go through a period of malaise. Gorillas go through a period of malaise that correlates with their midlife. So there appears to be a kind of growing pains biological element to it. But it is a great episode for anybody that's in their 40s right now, particularly if you've used phrases like, "I feel like I'm in a rut," "I'm sad, but I don't know why," "I have a good life, but I don't feel that happy about it, and I'm not sure why." If that is you, or you have a friend that's going through that kind of thing, it's an episode that is tackling midlife crises from a data-driven economic and social psychology perspective, and is a really good chat on the political orphanage.
Cool.
Sounds good. All right, that'll wrap it up for us today. For Jen Briney and Andrew Heaton, I'm Justin Robert Young, reminding you, dear listener and viewer, at our YouTube, youtube.com/We're Not Wrong, that we're not wrong. It's the name of the show, after all.
We're not wrong.
We're not wrong. Jen, you have to say it now, too.
Yeah.
I'm wrong, though.
No! You fucked that up.
That's it. The show's over, everybody. It's done. Thanks for watching. We're never doing it again. Turns out one of us was wrong.